I persuaded Malcolm to participate in an impromptu question and answer scene, and we should welcome our distinguished guest.
Thank you.
All the way from London, right?
Not quite.
No. Not exactly.
5 minutes away from GCHQ.
That's right. Okay. I recently had an extraordinary privilege of speaking with Malcolm for my interview program, which is called JFK Lancer Conversations. And Malcolm, one of the things that we talked about was differentiating between the type of information that is revealed to us because of the release of documents, and the type of information that is discovered because things that should be there are not. In other words, we learn things from a negative template.
Sure.
Things that should be there are not.
Right.
Could you give us any example at all of where you have followed the procedure? There are systems in place, there are mechanisms by which interested researchers can, through the National Archives, gain access legally, properly, to materials which are supposed to be there and are supposed to be available. Can you tell us about?
Are you talking specifically about National Archives or outside the Archives?
Anything at all. I mean,
Well, I mean, you're talking about absent stuff, missing stuff.
I'm talking about things where even with the assistance of someone acting on your behalf, knowing the right person, which is always a good thing,
Yeah.
and you end up with hardly anything to show for it.
Well, I think there's many ways you can travel in the National Archives for a start. You can look outside of your specific area. You know, if you look down an index at a national, I mean, it's a massive database which is hopelessly incomplete. Right now, you know, when you go online, if you go online, you look at this stuff. The database is just so out of date as to be unusable, I think. But if you go into files which seemingly would have no connection or no relation to your subject, like the Assassination Record Review Board files, General Counsel files, and you wanted to learn, say, about the Church Committee, and the Church Committee had there are a great amount of documents missing from the Church Committee files, and the Associate General Counsel of the Review Board did his own investigation and did a terrific investigation, actually working out which documents were missing. And of course, it's given us all a chance to work out where we need to look, because we get to what we talked about before. We get to choke points, you know. We get choke points. Choke points are where the story really doesn't add up at all. So these are areas where you always need to look very closely. Oswald's travel to the Soviet Union, I think, is a strong example for me, because that's still hopelessly incomplete. There's a counterintelligence staff printout from 77 or 78. Most of this stuff is courtesy of you and Dan Hardway and people like yourself. You managed to dig this stuff out, and I'm eternally grateful to you and Betsy Wolfe and Leslie Wiseman and all these people, because it's just helped me so much. But when you look at that stuff, then you can get some idea of where exactly to look. The choke points, as I call the choke points.
Let me offer my hypothetical. That was too vague.
Oh, you grading me?
I'm grading him. Because that question wasn't really a question. I want to start out, we decided to do this, to start out with a hypothetical. A bus pulls up at the National Archives. Out come two people. One is called Dan Hardway and the other one is Eddie Lopez. They walk in the building and they want to write something. They want to find everything that they can for the House Select Committee. They want to find documents written by themselves. They want to find the correspondence we talked about between Mr. Blakey and that fellow Scott Breckenridge. We want to find and both sides of the correspondence, not just the Breckenridge. We want to see the Blakey answers and so forth. All correspondence from other agencies to the House Select Committee. And we get your Fonzie files, if we can find any. Okay, so the two gentlemen walk into the archives. What do they, where did you send them? What do they do?
For Hardway and Lopez and anybody that was working on it, I would go for CIA RG 233. The researcher's notes, 36 boxes, they're there. A lot of the stuff came as a result of a 2010 delayed release, which was then brought forward to 2003. CI voluntarily released a lot of the stuff, the researcher's notes, which were extra. But a lot of those notes, Eddie, are still redacted.
And I have a question for you about that. So how about the notes that Dan and I were taking in the room within the HSCA annex to that we basically then had to put in envelopes, seal, and some of those were just basically, again, put in envelopes, sealed, and we just didn't even open up after, because, you know, we basically wrote the report, and we put stuff back. Is that stuff in there? Because there was some stuff in there that was incredibly important for a lot of our conjectures, etc., that just never really made it in because the issue was, well, what questions can we resolve?
Right.
As opposed to what questions are still not answered. That and what do we have on those? And we have stuff there that they know, in all honesty, right now, I can't think of them. But if I had access to them and then I could sit down and talk, I think we could basically recreate some of it while we're still not out of brain.
The envelope stuff is not in the CIA files. The only place I saw your envelope stuff, and I don't know why it's there, is in the FBI admin files, which is a very strange location for stuff which you.
So we don't even know if it's in the archives.
Well, it's there. If it's what you're talking about, researchers' notes in envelopes is in the FBI admin files from that period, from that House Select period. There's 41 boxes.
Why would it be FBI instead of CIA?
I could never figure it. I still can't figure it. I don't understand it.
Deliberate obfuscation?
Maybe.
Can you tell me what IDN system represented up until 1966?
IDN system was not 66. The
64.
64.
Right. It got junked.
It got junked. The IDN system was a parallel system of files to the 201 files. IDN files were, how would I describe it? Let me think. Individuals connected to targeted organizations. It's probably the best way. So, in other words, if you had a targeted organization, something like the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, these were individuals that were connected to that organization. That whole filing system got junked when the Warren Commission was sitting. It's never been done before, and it's never been done again. A whole filing system just completely dismantled inside the Record Integration Division. Those files ran in parallel to the 201 files. At some point, some of the information was consolidated into the 201 files. But I guess you never heard of this. No. But I mean, one name jumps out: Lee Harvey Oswald. Okay, he's an individual connected to a targeted organization.
Well, they kept telling us there was no Lee Harvey Oswald 201 file, and
Well, it could have been, you see, sideways.
oh, exactly. But then we talked to other people within the agency whom, after we interviewed, would say, "Can we go off the record?"
Add something there.
What?
Jim Lazar just got a memo from the CIA in response to his request to go into some of these things. And they listed a whole bunch of things that were still classified. And among them was a Lee Harvey Oswald 201 file and a Marina Oswald 201 file.
Sure.
And we thought the Oswald 201 file was published. We never knew about a Marina one, did we?
But I don't know. I always thought that was knowledge. I mean, I did know that for I've known that for many years. But there's a classified Marina Oswald file.
Bill?
Yeah.
And there's still a classified Oswald file.
Yes,
you know?
there's still a classified Oswald and Marina,
Sure.
Lee and Marina 201 files.
Correct.
In this memo
Correct.
from the CIA.
Sure.
And Jim said he never heard of either one of those.
Yeah, and there's also another set of files, the 301 files, which I think you said to me, can you do a presentation on 301 files? And I said to you, do you remember? I said, well, what I know about 301 files, I could put on the back of a cigarette packet.
That's because Alan thought that was very important.
I thought it was-
I don't know about it.
It is immensely important because no one has ever asked for 301 files
301 files are entity files. They're referred
to corporations.
Right, and so the theory, as I understand it, and it's possible I don't, is that the reason it's so sensitive is because, and the reason why it is among the materials which would be least voluntarily released is because it has relevance today in terms of how the CIA reaches into the fabric of the national security state.
Corporations.
And has relationships with corporations. We were talking
Banks.
about Professor Scott's improbable experience, which many people have not heard about. He had a publisher around 1970, 72 named called Bob's Merrill. And Bob's Merrill is based in Indianapolis, Indiana, so Bill Harvey comes back from
They published
Italy.
Sylvia's book too.
I'm sorry?
They published Sylvia's book.
Yes, that's right. So Bill Harvey comes back from Italy, fatter and drunker, and he's looking for something to do. So he finds a job as the legal advisor to Bob's Merrill. Coincidentally, Professor Scott, who's oblivious to all of this, obviously, he's got 3 chapters in a manuscript of a book which he intends to be published by his publisher. He gets communication from the publisher to the effect that they would discourage him from including these 3 top chapters in that particular book, and maybe that would be
What
better
year
for a
was
different book. 72. 70 or 72. 72.
Let me add something, because you're really off the topic a little bit. The 301 corporations, sorry, but you, but the 301s are covers for CIA. That's right.
The corporation, yeah. I mean,
That's
if you wanted to ask the CIA something, you could say, can you give me,
Let Malcolm.
can you give me, can you know, under some sort of FOIA or whatever, you could ask for the Hecht Corporation files, because when Paul Garbler came back from being security officer in the CIA station in Vienna, the first place he went, he left the agency, and he went to work for the Hecht Corporation. You know, yeah, right, you know. So I believe that.
Bill?
I wanted to ask about the 50 files, which I think are operational, the 100 files, the 200 files, and in particular, if you know what the 205-41 is.
I know what it is, I can't remember now. I mean, isn't it Soviet Russia stuff?
Either that or Oswald. But 50, 100, and 200, if you know what those are. 'Cause there's a lot of great
I do
stuff.
know, Bill, but you know, it's on my head. I've got it written down.
Another time.
I do have it.
Okay.
It's handwritten. It's coming out of, I think it's came out of, you know, the researcher's notes.
Okay.
So let me just follow up on it, because what I was saying that we would talk to people at the CIA, and then when we said anything else we should know, some people would say, well, are we off the record now? And they often told us, you know, the problem here is that you're never going to get pure and simple, because anything that's important is often kept by just one person in their file, in their desk.
Is that a soft file?
That was a soft file.
Right,
and, you
yeah.
know, and he said, no, don't tell you that they have files that are for your eyes only, and that they're, you know, with duct tape, they're closed up, etc. He said, but that's not even as important as the stuff that people just keep in their desk in a file for themselves because of the way we work. He said, you might be 3 desks down from somebody else who's doing work with you, and they don't know what the hell you're doing, but it's related.
And there are no checks or balances.
And there's no, and that's what he said. So he said, so it's very, they would say to us, a number of them, so it's very easy to have people from the agency doing something that nobody else knows about,
Even if they're sitting right next to you.
even they're sitting right next to you.
That's exactly true. I did quite a bit of work with Pete Bagley over the last 5 or 6 years, and we were talking about the operational components of the Soviet Russia division, SR9, and he said they just didn't have the first clue what was going on in SR9. It was so heavily compartmentalized, they just didn't know. And I said, well, how can you function within the agency with that level of compartmentalization? I just don't understand how it works.
Would you like to relay the experience you had? You were having lunch with Pete Bagley. That's actually the middle of the story. You were in Belgium.
Sure.
You spoke with Pete Bagley about a frustrating experience that you'd had. And was it at Georgetown University?
Oh, sure, yeah. I was trying to get, in the days I used to work with John Armstrong closely on Oswald, we were trying to get hold of some of the Marine Corps records, interviews that Ed Epstein did for, the Reader's Digest stuff, back in the 70s. And there was a stuff that came up online which said that there was a box of Marine Corps files at Georgetown University in the special collections. And that was Fulton Arsler's. Fulton Arsler, the editor of Reader's Digest, his stuff, was there. So I phoned up Georgetown Library's special collections and spoke to the guy that was looking after the collection, Scott Taylor, I think it was now. And Scott said, oh yeah, fine, come over. Yeah, sure, the stuff's available. So I flew over 3,000, whatever, 3,000 odd miles. I go to Georgetown. I go there thinking I'm going to get access to this box of files. And they said, oh no, it's sealed. You can't look at it. You can't see it, So I said, well, surely you can do something about it. He said, well, I feel very bad that you've come all this way, so I'll call Mr. Arsler, which he did do right in front of me, called Fulton Arsler. And Arsler said, no, it's sealed, forget it, go away. So all this time later, as Alan said, I'm having lunch with Pete at the restaurant opposite his apartment, and I said about the difficulties. We were talking about difficulties in getting documents sometimes, and I said about I couldn't get access to these documents in the Orsler collection at Georgetown. He said, "Oh, I'll call him up," which he did do. He called. He knew Fulton Arsler as Tony Arsler. So he calls up Tony. He said, "I've got a friend here, and he wants to look at this stuff. It's in box number 3 of your collection, but it's sealed." Oh, he said, "Send him over. He can look at it." So,
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. So yeah, and a few months later, I was coming over to the archives, and I thought, well, I'll go down to Georgetown and get into this box because I want to see all these Marines that were never interviewed, associates of Oswald, The Warren Commission never interviewed these people. The House Select Committee never interviewed. It was Epstein's researchers, over 100 people that he found, his researchers found. So I get there, and the response is, "No, you can't look at it." So I said, "Well, I've got permission. It's an email here. I've got permission for Mr. Arsler to look at it." And he look at the email as if to say, "Well, this is nothing." I said, "Well, call him up." So they call him up, and the words are, "Let Mr. Blunt look at the box."
And
So
how many years between your original effort and that moment?
that would have been almost 13 years.
13 years.
Wow. So we're now in what year?
This is 2012.
So what did you find?
Well,
That's
yeah. This is a bit like something out of Howard Carter's tomb and the Tutankhamun and all this business. All the archivists go out there and they collect the box, which is a big box. It's a big FRC box, massive box, and it's carried out. It's all taped up. Everything is taped up. Hasn't been touched for years and years and years. Dust all over it. So, okay. Gets set down on the counter there at Georgetown Library at the special collections, and it's delicately opened, and all the rest of it comes off. This tape comes off, and the gape's up on, and open the box. It's half empty. Every single interview of those Marines was missing.
Yeah.
And Arsler went nuts because he was like, it made him look an idiot. Absolute idiot.
Maybe that's why it was sealed. I want to ask you a question. I've been hearing a lot of this lately, and I've been told that no one knows this stuff better than you do.
Really?
I'm hearing all these stories lately about things that have been classified that are being reclassified, that have been declassified that are being reclassified, or files that have been available, but people are slipping things into them.
That's the Interagency Reclassification project. I really came up against that really badly, because I was looking for some obscure CIA files, and the stuff was previously out. It was previously released, and when I went back to it again, there were pull slips in. The whole box has got green pull slips in, and it says on each pull slip it says out, IRC project pending.
I asked Jim about that, about whether that would be illegal under the JFK Records Act, and he said, I think so.
Well, these are, as we were talking about earlier on, these are unrelated files. Then you wouldn't necessarily think these were anything to do with JFK.
There are 50,000 files that are designated NBR, which is not believed relevant, and those are just from the Rockefeller Commission alone. So, Jeff?
No, there's 50,000 pages.
Oh, pages,
That's
I'm
Jim's
sorry.
estimate. There's 1,100 NBR documents.
Okay.
And they're all from CIA.
Okay.
And what they were was, in the mid-'70s, when all the investigations started, the CIA created an office to respond. And they said, let's get all the records that might be asked about. And so they put them all in a room. And then when the HSCA came and asked for them, they drew from that collection and they gave them. And so those documents that the HSCA got became the CIA's segregated collection.
Chip.
The documents that were left behind that the HSCA never saw, because they never asked for them, were the ones that had to be designated as JFK records because they've been pulled in connection with an investigation. And those are the NBR files that are set for 2017.
Those were
50,000 pages is just an estimate. I mean, based on, so there's seven David Atlee Phillips files, and that's about 600 pages of material.
Wow.
So if you do that, if you do that math, you come out with a number that's between 15 and 50,000 if you extrapolate.
I got you.
So not only are they not releasing files that they should be, but they're taking files back.
Yeah, well, I mean, it looks like it in that particular case. Yeah. I mean, I was there one time when the Bush pullbacks were really going strongly at National Archives, and there was a university professor from Melbourne there, and he'd been working in State Department files for many, many years. He came and he's obviously writing books or on some project. And he ordered his cart, he got stuff out that he expected to find. He went through the boxes, half the stuff is missing. I mean, the guy went nuts. I thought, any minute now the security guards are going to come and he's going to be dragged, screaming out the room. Can you imagine? You're working for years and years and years. You go to your boxes that you've been working in, and the stuff is gone. People pulled the stuff back.
You see, the deal here is that it's all that stuff that's deemed non-relevant that's important. Because what Dan and I found is that if we asked for a Lee Harvey Oswald file, we weren't going to get it. But if we asked for a file about Russia, blah,
Yeah.
or fair pay for Cuba, and we got that, then we found out about it. And often they would forget to, as they were writing things out, to write out a number. We say, well, can we get number 356297? And they, well, how do you get that? And go, right there. And then they go, we'll see if we can find it. And at the beginning they get it to us. And it wasn't until later on that they started.
Yeah, I've got that sense that the relationship changed when you were doing too well. You were doing too well. That was the point there, I think.
Yeah, when they figured you weren't as stupid and naive as they had originally.
Yeah, they thought you were, yeah.
Do we know who is responsible for the Interagency Reclassification project, or who is enacting it?
No idea. I don't know who's doing that. Well, I think it stopped anyway. It stopped. But some of the documents are still obviously still in the process of being returned to the files. They were supposed to put them back in the files, allegedly. So.
When we spoke.
But they do make mistakes. You know,
Oh,
yeah, they do
Well,
make mistakes.
You always say, you know, human error.
Error,
right?
yeah. I mean, you get stuff that really does slip through the cracks. Some wonderful stuff, you know.
And the question is it a mistake or, you know, coincidence or conspiracy? Putting it bluntly, because certainly when Dan and I got the information about the people that were double agents at the Cuban embassy, we asked about it, they were like beyond upset.
Where did you get that from? Yeah, exactly.
And Dan and I were convinced that that was put in by somebody deliberately.
I know it already. That the memo supposedly found in the archives, which I think is a forgery. Oh, what was it? It was from the head of the Secret Service to the head of the FBI.
The rally
Found
memo.
in the
Yeah.
archives.
Yeah, the McCone document.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was in Gray Douglas's book, and now it's.
Well, that all seems to me quite sophisticated because, you know, if you know how McCone wrote his memos, everything was done in like, you know, the cadences were like rat-a-tat, ba-bum, ba-bum. And when you look through that McCone, it blends exactly with his release correspondence. These short paragraphs, the way that he writes, you could almost, you know, superimpose it. But then when it finishes with, you know, the signature, which looks like it's been lifted off the, you know, the declaration to the Warren Commission that Lee Harvey Oswald was never an employee. It looks exactly the same signature has been taken off that document, superimposed on that one. But the letterhead is fine. I mean, I think, Lisa,
Yeah,
you queried that,
yeah.
but I mean, I've seen others.
Possibility it's legit?
No.
I don't think so, but I think you would know.
For me, I'm not dismissing. The only thing I dismiss is the signature. I do not like that signature, and I don't know what's going on there. I said to some people it could have been part of the 1966 James Mastrovito cull of Secret Service files. Could have been. You know, if they'd have left off the signature, I think I would have been, you know, I would have been in there, hook, line, and sinker. I think I probably would have believed it. But the signature is very iffy, you know.
The source of that document, though, was a known admitted document forger. The first
Yeah,
time it
yeah,
ever
yeah.
came to the public.
But he's obviously had access. He's obviously had access to McCone's correspondence because it, you know, the way he writes is
Right.
exactly the same.
Well, and it would make sense if he's an intelligent asset.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
We don't have an enormous amount of time, and I don't necessarily want to go over material that we've already touched upon. But you surprised me during our conversation more than once. And one time in particular was because you've spent so much time dealing with the nuts and bolts of the materials that are available, especially from the Warren Commission era. You recognize Alan Dulles' handwriting.
Yeah.
So what was the big sweeping Alan Dulles signature pertaining to a report about when evidence which had been gathered in Dallas was actually shipped to CIA or FBI headquarters before it was reshipped and officially cataloged in Dallas?
Yeah, that was James Callaghan stuff. I think John Armstrong did a bit. I remember when I first got that document, I talked to John about it, and then, you know, Jim, did you ever used to get late night phone calls from John?
I don't think so.
I used to get in the middle of the night, you know, English time, 3 o'clock in the morning, and he's on, yeah, you know, and he's.
I guess, you know, you're well done.
So like he's.
He calls in the middle of the night, I'm in Hong Kong.
Yeah, right. So he's like, you know, he got very excited about the document, and quite rightly so, because it's clear that Alan Dulles was managing the Warren Commission testimony of various people, certainly. I mean, and Callaghan was one of them. The only two people present at that deposition, that testimony, was the guy that was taking it was Melvin Eisenberg, and Dulles was the only commission guy in the room. And then afterwards, Dulles got hold of the transcript and then edited it. And the piece he took out was when James Callaghan said that all the evidence reached FBI headquarters early on the morning of the 23rd of November.
Dulles edited that?
Yep.
23rd.
23rd.
Yeah, Dulles did the editing process on
And
that.
he gives his statement in the Warren reports. Do you know of any other interviews with Cadigan besides the Warren Commission?
No, I know that Cadigan made sure that his testimony, when in '66 he was involved with moving a lot of the stuff into the National Archives from the FBI, and then he put his own testimony back together. Thank God for Mr. Cadigan, you know. So then we know where it's been fiddled with. We know where Dulles fiddled
Well,
with
what
it.
was the word that Dulles wrote?
Delete.
Succinct.
I didn't know that part of the story. I know that it had been edited out. I didn't know it was Dulles who edited it out. Okay.
Look, we have less than 15 minutes. Please tell us everything we need to know about the Office of Mail Logistics and the security research staff.
7 years to last.
All right, 9 minutes, I'm sorry. How important do you think, as you reflect upon these things, you absorb everything and then you live with it and it percolates, how important do you think Bruce Soley is to understanding things relevant to the relationship between CI-SIG and...
Well, I mean, there were two people in the security research staff, and the only people they ever talked to was Angleton's group, which was CI-SIG. And, you know, I've looked at the way the information came into CIA when Oswald defected, and that came into mail logistics, which was in the DDI then, Office of Central Reference. It got sent to the RID analysts, and then instead of making its way to the geographic desks within the Soviet Russia division, it turned right, and it went to the security research staff. It went to the Office of Security. And that you could only do that if you
subscription.
you had to go to mail logistics and make your case. If you wanted, yeah, customer driven. If you wanted a dissemination, that's where you went. You went to mail logistics. And if you wanted a change, you couldn't change it. The only people that could change the dissemination process was the Office of Security. I think probably in Oswald's case, it was the security research staff. That would be General Gaynor and Bruce Soley. And so the stuff, you know, people say about the 201 file wasn't open for a year. It wasn't open for a year because Angleton and Gaynor and Soley kept it in a loop outside of the central record system. You know, I've talked to Jeff about this, the purpose of which I think probably was to try and tease out a mole, because when that information on Oswald came in, it did go to two places in the Record Integration Division. Stay with me, Jim, don't fall asleep. In the Record Integration Division, there are two well, in one space in the record, which is RID indexing, which is a passive dissemination. In other words, it goes there. Passive. So that goes there and stays there. The other passive part of the original Oswald information goes to counterintelligence liaison, and that stays passive as well. These people aren't doing anything with the information. The action is to the security office. The action is to the security office. And they only talk to Angleton, nobody else. So that's how it was kept out of the system. And they would have to know within Angleton's group and within the security research staff before Oswald defected.
Pre-knowledge.
Pre-knowledge to get the dissemination. They would have to make, it's a bureaucracy, it's a bureaucracy, they have to do it. And there's a paper trail.
Well, where did Oswald's files go the first 31 days?
After his defection?
Do you know?
Yeah.
No?
I went to the security office.
What?
Went to the security office.
His office of security file.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, where the original, well, there's no files in RID.
Right.
There's no files.
Newman talks about this black hole.
Yeah, yeah, he's right. The files are in the Office of Security, but he doesn't identify where that is. That's the security research staff who deal with defectors and penetrations, and they talk to Angleton all the time. You know, Egerton and Soley were joined at the hip. So you know, that's the only people.
That's where they went.
Yeah, SIG is the interface.
The files, any file on Oswald is in the security research staff. There is no 201 file.
Okay.
Okay?
Lisa?
Yeah, I have a question just a little separate from this current topic, and that's, when you were working with Armstrong, were you responsible for finding the Culligan files? Bud Culligan, does that ring a bell for you?
Yeah, we looked at that, yeah.
Because I was able to send some of that off to the UN when they were investigating Dag Hammarskjöld's stuff.
Yeah,
But,
that's stuff we couldn't really sort of find our way through that stuff, I don't think, you
Yeah,
know?
that's what I was wondering, is did anybody ever try and follow up and contact?
There
that
are
guy?
tape recordings up there. If you
That was the other thing I wanted to know, are the tape recordings still there? I'd
yes,
like to hear
yes,
them.
yeah.
Are they
The
available?
last time I was up there, they were still there.
Are they available, meaning?
Yes,
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah.
Are the HSCA tape recordings available?
Some.
Because, you know.
HSCA tape recordings, there are a few, yeah. I mean, in terms of black hole, I think motion picture, you know, sound and video is the black hole of the National Archives. I mean, they have a lot of material, but not much of it finds its way onto the shelves.
Gus Russo told me back when he was working for Oliver Stone, and before we learned more about him, he told me that he had gone to the archives and he tricked them into bringing out all of these tapes, and he's telling me about all of these tapes he was listening to that are classified. And, yeah, I don't even know if we should believe him now, because, you know, he's...
I see Max Holland has entered the room. Hello, Max. I wanted to, you just reminded me, I wanted to talk about the Warren Commission interfiling. Another very sort of obtuse thing to talk about, I guess. But from 2004 until probably mid-2007, there was a massive effort in the National Archives to get out every record that was withdrawn in the Warren Commission. Okay? So all that stuff has been dropped into the files. If you go to the office files of staff, which I used to look at back in the 90s, record, is it entry 44, Max? Entry 44, office files of staff? Okay, yeah. So entry 44, you go into David Slauson's file, which was empty. It's like this. It's bulging with notes, you know? All this.
David Slauson?
David Slauson, yeah. A lot of that stuff, you could go into Slauson's file. It wasn't, you know, typewritten memos and stuff like that. But all his working papers are in there now. I mean, this is great stuff.
This was 2004, you said?
Between 04 and 07.
04 and 07. Now, the bad news is, Jim,
So you mean...
there is bad news. There is no...
You said the ARB didn't know anything about this?
Well, they must have known the Warren Commission stuff was withdrawn.
Yeah.
But,
Wow.
but you know, we're talking
So
too
they didn't even get the Warren Commission stuff, is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying that at all. I mean,
What's the bad
What do you
news?
think?
What's the bad news?
the bad news is there's no index. There's no finding aid.
Great.
So
Oh,
you
so
have
we need her.
Yeah.
you have 440 boxes in record group 272, and you have no finding index for all the documents that have been interfiled, that have been dropped in these files.
We have 4 minutes, and we have to stop because at 11 o'clock sharp, Professor Peter Gale Scott's going to be hooked up upstairs, and we want to.
Okay, since I got here late, you probably answered this. What's the latest version of the, I don't want to call it Lopez report, the Hardway Lopez report? What's the latest version? Is it completely unredacted now?
I haven't seen it completely underwritten.
No, it's not, we asked about that. It's not complete.
It's not completely unredacted.
Still.
How redacted is it?
It's pretty much like close to what it was in 1993, I guess it was.
It's still,
It's, I mean, I pulled it off the way, and then I contacted Dan to see if he had a more recent copy. And the changes are like, it's like no changes at all. And you know, the thing is that Dan and I started looking at it and saying, you know, so what can we fill in? And it's just really hard. I mean, after all these years, and I've got to be honest, and I'd like to be able to say, gee, I remember this, but I really don't. And it's really hard to make sense of it. And you said you've seen, you know, there's tapes in there. So are tapes of us interviewing David Phillips in there, do you know?
Yes.
With
Yeah.
Michael Goldsmith during the interview? that's in there?
Yeah, I'm not sure which tapes they are. Some are still sitting
have
there.
they-
It's a very if you ask for this stuff, it's possible you may get it. But then again, you'd have to get a decent finding aid because the finding aid you get up there, the only decent finding aid I ever found was the one that the National Archives gave to the review board. And a lot of my finding aids don't come out of NARA, they come out of the Assassination Records review board files, you know, the stuff they used. I built my own finding aids because the other stuff is just, you know, I feel sorry for people going in there. You know, it's pathetic.
Because I would love to listen to that tape again now, knowing what we know today.
Oh,
Yes.
boy, I'll
As
say.
opposed to, you know, what we knew back then in 1978.
Did you ever come across the annex? Was Oswald an agent of the CIA?
No. No, not at all. No, I didn't see that at all.
Matt, you can be around later, I really want to talk to you about this stuff. I want to give you some
Bring a chair.
Yeah, I know.
I want to tell you, when we talked about, you know, things that slip through the cracks, you know, for Eddie, this is one for Eddie, okay? 1996, I requested Fair Play for Cuba Committee files, okay? I got 2 full cards, by mistake, of the National Fair Play for Cuba Committee FBI files. No redactions whatsoever. Nothing!
Ah.
For
3 days I had them, but I was so green round the gills, I didn't really take advantage. And then they snatched them back. They realized their mistake.
And that's the problem, you know, you always want to go back and say, gee, knowing what I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What could I do with it? 'Cause, you know,
Yeah.
we're 21 years old and we knew nothing, I mean, about this stuff. So it was, for us, it was all news and we were like sponges trying to grab it, and it's just so hard. So yes, I'd love to listen to that interview again, knowing what I know now. I mean, I'd like to go back into those documents that we saw that we said, how are they related? I mean, what's important about this? And Jesus, we had about 9 months to look at this stuff. And
I'll tell you something, you guys did miracles. And
Oh, yeah.
Betsy Wolfe, you know, for me, because I'm looking at internals, you know, the way the CIA shifts its paper around, you know, which is, you know, arcane and boring. But she did all the read. She broke her back doing that stuff, and she almost got it. She almost got it, you know. She just didn't get the final pieces of the puzzle. And some of that stuff is still redacted. We talk about classified documents. I mean, the testimony of Robert Gambino. Did you ever get into that stuff? I mean, it's all I get is researchers' notes for that, 3 pages. But the guy was fantastically open. I mean, you could tell for the notes.
Wasn't Gambino Officer Security?
Yeah.
We really have no more time. We have to go upstairs where Peter Dale Scott is going to be 11. Before we conclude, at the very end, we all rely on intuition and things, you know, you absorb things and you think about them over decades. Are you increasingly interested in the Peter Popoff part of this story?
I think that's what we're looking at with also. I mean,
Okay.
yeah, when Peter...
Can you say?
Sure.
We have to go upstairs. Let's thank our friend now.